This is the Situation Room on SpiceFM, on KTN Home, on KTN News as well. In the studio with you, as always, every weekday morning is Eric Latif, Ndu Oko, CT Muga. And now we're joined in the studio by Her Excellency Kirsty Kaliulide, the President of Estonia, the world's most advanced digital society. Good morning.
Good morning, Kenya.
It's good to have you in the studio. Welcome to the Situation Room. This is where we have Kenya's biggest conversations. And we're glad that you have joined us to have this conversation with us. How do you say good hello in Estonian?
I am going to assassinate the language completely, but Your Excellency, bear with me. I wrote it down and I hope I can read it correctly. Kuidas sul läheb?
Thank you, Karibu sana. It goes really well.
Kuidas sul läheb?
I think you have used this Google Translate and an audio version.
Yes,
there.
I actually listened to that Google Translator.
Exactly.
A number of times.
Yes, because I can recognize the intonation of Google Estonian.
Oh.
But it was good, very natural.
Thank you.
So how would you say it?
Exactly the same way. Kuidas sul läheb? But I would say kuike, kuidas sul läheb?
Oh, kuidas sul läheb?
Quicker.
Okay, okay.
But thank you for having me, and I see Kenya is doing great, and I really believe that we can do good things together. You started from our digital prowess, and I believe that this country has so much potential to leapfrog with the help of technologies.
Indeed. We shall be getting to that conversation, and you'll tell us how you got to where you are right now as a country. You're in the country for a couple of days. What brings you to Kenya?
Actually, it's my last state visit while in office as a President of the Republic of Estonia, and it's very fitting that it comes to an African country, because I was the one who led Estonian campaign for United Nations Security Council, and I really fell in love with this continent while we were doing it. And it obviously became clear to us that Estonia, despite that we are 1 million people and just exited the middle income countries rank, we are now a lower level rich country, but we can contribute to the development of this continent by using our own example, because 30 years ago Estonia regained its independence. We were occupied by the Soviet Union, and then we regained our independence, and an average salary then was about $30 per month. Now it's 1,500 euros per month. And we have, in these 30 years, we have done things differently. And I believe this is maybe the message what we can really share with our brothers and sisters here in Africa, that if people come and tell you that if you do these things which we did before you, then you will catch up. I was already 20 years ago, when I was advising Prime Minister of Estonia, I was wondering, if I do what you did and do it 30 years, 40 years later, how on earth am I going to catch up? Yeah. No way! So you have to do things your own way, differently, to find leapfrogging opportunities. And I see here this kind of thinking on the whole continent, particularly if I look at the African Union, which is really ready to take responsibility for the development of the 4 freedoms, the free movement of people, capital in Africa, and also the digital development. I really appreciate what I'm seeing in Africa and also here in Kenya. That's why.
Your Excellency, take us back 30 years to where you're saying this is where Estonia basically just started putting on into gear 6, into gear 7. Now you're, I think, on 15th gear. But just take us back to those 30 years ago. How was Estonia? What was happening in the country?
It was a country where people didn't have bank accounts, where people didn't pay taxes, because in Soviet Union then they didn't pay your salary, therefore you didn't pay taxes. It was a country which had lost all its economic connections because they were, forged towards Soviet Union. But this ecosystem disappeared. It was a country which regained its independence and which realized it has to become part of the multilateral free world to protect this independence. So rule of law, institutions which have their own right to operate in the society, all this needed to be created. And then we set out to do it. And Estonian people, when we regained independence, we wanted to do everything differently than how it had been under the occupation, which obviously meant that, personal freedoms and personal rights became extremely important in Estonia. Our constitution is very strong on all that. And this actually unleashed also the economic potential, because, only free people are truly creative. You cannot be creative in business if you're not free. If you're afraid that somebody takes your business away or treats your business differently because, you are not friend with the political elite or something. And this way we started step by step. And then we realized that our people expect government services, but we do not have government offices. But we also noticed that private companies already did everything on intranet and online. And for example, banking went online in Estonia in 1994 because banks had the same problem. Estonians were very poor and they live far from each other. We are not a densely populated place, so it didn't pay off to have bank offices. So they offered online services. And the government was watching and said, but we want also to do the same way. First online service was tax office. Nobody wants to see the taxman. Estonians have never seen a taxman because you do it online.
Yeah.
And we realized this is our way forward. And what we really didn't realize was that we are the only ones in Europe who think this way. We thought, in a couple of years' time, everybody would be doing what we are doing. Because in Estonia, we don't separate the world into private sector and the government. And we do not expect government to provide a lower level of service than is private sector. Frankly speaking, we didn't know this is a normality in many countries. And we were very astonished when we started to put out public services online. And everybody was like, how are you doing it? We said exactly like Amazon or Google or newspapers or exactly the same way. Why are you asking? And indeed, we didn't think it will not be the same in every country. We expected everybody to do the same. And now they are doing the same, but it took 20 years.
20 years is not a long time, though, Your Excellency. If you look 20, 30 years, if anybody looks at that situation, would say that it looks like there was a lot of work that was done in a very short period of time. What are some of the other ingredients that were applied to this process?
Yeah, that's exactly. Estonians think 20 years is extremely long time because we've only regained independence 30 years ago. So we think that in 20 years, it's a generation. You can grow a digital generation. And this is exactly what I think is now going to happen in many African countries, including Kenya. You are ready, and your president says you want to go also the same way. Then you have to bring up a digital generation, register every baby's birth by mobile phone, offer them vaccination over online. This way you will also, grow your national population registry. You can attach all services to it. This can be done, and it takes about 10 years. And your people really realize it's really comfortable that you don't have to go and queue in offices. It's such a carrot for society to change that it's so much more comfortable. And also digital offers you not only, this kind of digital services, but I give you a really concrete example. Kenyan Water Fund is just now when we are talking here discussing with one Estonian company, Space Trip, about the project where it's a pilot. 10,000 homes in Nairobi will have kind of water purification system, which is local, linked to a household, but controlled electronically, totally electronically handled, managed to make Nairobi river cleaner. And this is only a pilot. But you can do it, far easier than you would if you build a huge, sewage management plant. It takes a long time to plan and then to build, and the capital cost is huge. But you go little by little, and you can add households every day. And suddenly you will have a system which will actually make your river cleaner. And this way, only in connecting everything digitally, you can make dispersed systems act like previously we were used to having a big system. The same in energy, for example, in electricity grids. You don't need anymore a big plant. You can have small solar systems with a little bit of a cells, and it works. So you can kind of cut the initial capital cost very much by using digital connection of many, thousands small systems. And this Space Trip project, I believe this is a really nice example.
Your Excellency, you speak well of our country and we thank you. Given that Kenya is a hub, a multilateral hub for businesses, for and travel, UN, if I may ask, has your government considered having an embassy?
We have been gradually rising our visibility and presence in this country. Yes. And our business is now putting a huge pressure on Minister of Foreign Affairs. I could see it yesterday evening when we had drinks with our delegation, to have an embassy. We are represented at the UN level here, and we have an honorary consul. She's Estonian, very nice Estonian lady. But of course, they do a lot of things like Estonians always do. You don't have an ambassador, but you have a couple of people in the town, so of course they act as if they were ambassadors. This is simply an Estonian way of moving things. But indeed, everybody is now demanding from our country that there is a lot of opportunity, let's do an embassy. On the other hand, Estonia is a small country, and we have very few embassies in Africa at all. But you know, when we were doing our Security Council campaign, many people asked me that, why don't you establish embassies while you're campaigning? And I said, look, we have about maybe €1 million which we can annually spend in development programs, on this continent. Do you want me to establish a couple of houses with 4 limousines and 6 gentlemen? Or you want me to dedicate all these resources, let's say, for Smart Africa, standardization? And everybody said the second. And then I said, hold on, the leaders of African nations, then you have to be my ambassadors to your countries, because I'm not going to establish these embassies. I'm instead having a memorandum of understanding with African Union on digital development. So you see, we can do things differently, and I'm quite sure that this kind of 21st century diplomacy works very well for small mobile countries. But indeed, our business today is putting a pressure to have an embassy here.
Good. Now, we talk about the plans that you had as a government. 20 years, there was a blueprint that was rolled out. There have been changes in government in Estonia over the 20 years, but the same fidelity to that blueprint has remained. What is it about the people of Estonia that has made them remain true to that plan, even as they keep changing politically?
Because the results were imminent. First, for example, we took papers away from government meeting, and government started to use computerized system. And it paid back in 3 months by really getting many positive reviews in Western newspapers. And we didn't have to buy advertisements, Estonia positively transforming or something. People were everywhere writing about this government without papers. We were frankly astonished because, as I said, every bank was operating this way by that time. But we realized it paid off. And we used this argument when we were deciding to do the digital ID, because Ministry of Finance, of course, was very much against, because we couldn't demonstrate for them where's the return on this investment. We couldn't imagine, what will happen. But we managed to convince them by demonstrating that, the government system already had paid itself back. So definitely there will be benefits. And we then decided. And then indeed, because the banks also took this digital ID as a gateway to their services and telecoms and all others, because they realized it's better than having your own kind of codes and identities, because it had government guarantee. And government had legally also set the framework which guaranteed the safety of access online through this digital ID, and it's encrypted when you use it as well. And everybody saw the value in it. So private sector actually came on board and made this development sustainable, because government was relatively slow with its rollout. I believe that, ID happened 2001, and maybe by 2005 we felt that most government services are interlinked and online. But private sector sustained us for this period, that people did not get disappointed in the digital ID, and they also got to, started to use it and realized that, there are benefits in having just one access tool for every service in the country, also having an encrypted format for it. So, how does a normal person realize it? They are in encrypted format. Do you want to know? I can tell you. If you order plane tickets over an online page and pay with your credit card, they send you advertisements for next 3 months whether you want to fly again to the same spot. Same about booking.com and all these things.
Yep.
But if you are logging in with your digital ID, and let's say buying solar cells from a solar cells company, and they are also signing the document with their digital ID, and then you enter your bank and pay with your digital ID through your bank link, nobody sends you advertisements. They are not listening in. That proves to people that it's a safe.
It's secure.
It is secure, yes. Right. And that's why, everybody has been keeping doing it, because it, simply pays back very well.
Sure. There are many processes which involve people, right? And one of the issues, if we're just drawing parallels here on the continent, one of the issues that we often have to deal with is corruption. How, if that was a present issue, or if it was a past issue in Estonia, was government able to deal with that?
Digital alone even if it's a transparent and easy to monitor model, does not change your governance culture. This is unfortunately, which I always have to tell people. I mean, you have to have strong, independent institutions. And I mean, you have to have police who has the right to take the city mayor of the biggest town in the country and question, why did you do this and that, and send them to court if necessary. You have to have a system which removes the indemnity from a member of a parliament if they have been, I mean, wasting government money. And this needs to happen if things go on, so that people realize that, I mean, institutions are strong and they protect you and they're able to protect you. And this is what we have been doing. So I'm sorry to say this has nothing to do with digital development. This is totally separate thing. Because, I mean, you can digitalize whichever type of bureaucracy. I mean, if you have, for example, a heavy and cumbersome bureaucracy and you simply digitalize it, you will get a very efficient and effective cumbersome bureaucracy, which might be even more difficult to tolerate. So transformation does not change the governance culture in any country. You have to work on that yourself.
So the culture of governance and the culture of making sure that people are doing things ethically, you said it's a big thing. And you've also mentioned something important, making sure that you have independent and strong institutions. How do you guarantee that independence? We have very many independent institutions in this country, but I think the question is whether the independence of those institutions is guaranteed from political interference.
Here, your role, my friends from media, comes in very strongly. I mean, you cannot repress an institution if there is free media in a country, because, I mean, they will yell from the rooftops that something's fishy. And we have in Estonia fierce and free media, and if you look at the media freedom index, is really high there, I think in the low teens or something like that. And this is what guarantees also that you cannot touch the institutions. Because, I mean, they are protected by society as a whole and also by free media. And this is why you very often see that if countries, start to stray from this kind of good path of development, then they go after their free media. For me, this is always this kind of a canary bird situation, that if free media feels they are suppressed, something fishy is going on with governance in the country. And in Estonia, our media is extremely free. I can tell you all politicians basically don't like it. I mean, how can you like? I mean, everybody asking nasty questions and feeling very comfortable in asking these nasty questions, and you have to answer every one of them. But this is the price you pay, I mean, for keeping your institutions independent and strong.
You know, there's the path that was followed to get to this point. Because human nature, given what it is and how it is, there are things human beings simply don't like. If you're in a position of authority and power, you would like people to sort of like do what it is that you expect them to do. How is it that as a people you have embraced this culture that brings about the levels of accountability that you're speaking of?
Actually, we realized that, I mean, if we want to be part of the free world where rights are respected, freedoms are respected, media is free, institutions are independent, they only accept us even to trade with us if we are like that. And we wanted to be members of the European Union. So, I mean, instead of convincing each and every Estonian that corruption is bad and free media is good, we convinced them that, I mean, we need access to this strong market, I mean, of European Union. Otherwise, we cannot grow our economy. And as I said, we were extremely poor at that time. So people really went along with all of this changing, mostly for, I mean, economic benefit, and all Estonians also realized that being member of the European Union allows us also to aspire to be member of NATO, and all this together is also a security blanket, I mean, for Estonians, so that the Iron Curtain can never fall again. So initially we didn't bother to convince our people very much about the rule of law. And it's very interesting that, I mean, our constitution is very strong on rule of law and so on. But now, a couple of years ago, we suddenly had kind of a public discussion about personal freedoms and rule of law and even free media, because we simply hadn't had it 30 years ago. So coming to a certain age, having a certain economic, I mean, capability already, people now kind of atavistically reverted to the discussion which they should have had when we were approving our constitution in 1992, but which then nobody did because it was Estonian constitution. We simply approved it. We didn't compare it. Okay, it gives the minorities these rights, I mean, gay rights, I mean, all this. And people didn't question it. And then suddenly came back to it a decades later. And we had this discussion.
And they're starting to poke holes.
Yeah.
But President, I'm intrigued by Estonia's political system. It's a parliamentary system.
Yes.
You as the president are the head of state, and then the prime minister is the head of government. First of all, it's a big congratulations for having president and prime minister who are both women leading this country. Now, back to the political question. How is it that a country so small with such a few number of voters cannot have just 2 or 3 dominant political parties? That it has to be led by a coalition of parties?
It's the electoral model. It's a modified TONT model, which actually makes sure that, the parliament has a high number of parties within it, which means that all political views in Estonia are represented through parliament. And then in the parliament, they have to gather a majority, a simple majority to form a government. But because you have many fractions, four has been minimum, and then we were already worried that it's too low a number. 6 is pretty normal, 5 is current. And then they have to form a coalition, which again means that, no government can be, straightforward left or right thing, or for openness or totally for kind of closedness. It has to be a coalition. And this also guarantees this kind of stability in developments that, there are never revolutions. There is this conservative path of anticipating where the world is going and trying to kind of anticipate and react before you need a revolution or a radical change. So it's a very balanced model. And now for the president's role, to elect a president, you need an absolute majority. So coalition cannot do it. It has to be a kind of a broader political consensus. And this also guarantees president a certain independence to pinpoint, even if your power is legally quite small, but you can pinpoint and show light to the issues where, as a society, we must pay more attention. And this is the role of every president, which normally makes them relatively unpopular when they are in the office with the politicians, but popular with people, which of course helps, to carry out this role. It seems to be the fate of all of us elected this way. And I really feel that, at least for Estonians, this kind of parliamentary model works really well.
Has the country been able to keep politics out of government business?
No, politics is in the government business, but there are different colors of politicians in the government, and when you have to argue about where we go, then normally the consensus is centered pretty much in the center of where you could go. For example, we have really heated debates in Estonia about an issue which is important here as well. You are a country which regrets its deforestation and tries to reforest yourself. We are a country which is 60% covered with wood. And we have very bitter debates about, how much we can cut this wood. Both sides are strong. Some have more money, others are louder, and finally, we are basically staying on the main course while we are all the time arguing. It looks nasty, but we stay the course, I believe, which is more or less balanced. This is, a modus operandi for this kind of a multipolar political world in Estonia. And also, of course, we try to then technologically to support, sustainable development. For example, also here we have an Estonian company, Timbetter, who is working on an environmentally kind of beneficial logging. And I just yesterday asked, could you also ask help with reforestation projects? And they said yes. They are now thinking of a system where they could also electronically help to handle and manage reforestation process.
How would that be done? This country, we've been talking about, reforesting the country and getting to a certain forest cover. You have 60% forest cover in your country. We are struggling to get to 10% and maintain that. So how would Estonian private sector and even your government be able to help us improve this? And you're saying electronically.
Yes, this is, by the way, not government. This is a private sector enterprise. They work also with, for example, Latin American huge timber companies. What they do is that when somebody cuts the logs, and then they provide the company with a system which they take a photo with their mobile phone and they immediately measure what is there, what quality it is, and it goes into the central database. So nobody can lie, nobody can steal. It's all very visible and transparent and also efficient. There will be no losses because if you know what you're bringing out of the wood, you already can sell different parts to different factories which do different things to it. And they yesterday explained to me that they are now thinking about how to make a same kind of controllable, transparent framework for reforestation. Don't ask me, ask Timbeter to come here and explain to you in a closer detail.
Yep.
Because in principle, a politician in Estonia is a dumb user of the electronic systems because, I mean, they are all built by private sector. We are smart
Users.
prosecutors. And then how the black box functions. Well, I have 2 degrees, genetic engineering and MBA. I don't know what is within these things, but they do what we ask them to do, and they are also able to demonstrate to us that we can trust that they don't sneak our data away, which is also an important element. Trusted connectivity. Right. You have to know who controls the technology and the data. And we just had Tallinn Digital Summit with OECD, European Union, US present, and started to build Tallinn consensus about how we want to see that in 21st century we are sure that we can trust our connections. Like today we trust all these geopositioning systems, the GPS, because it's run by a democracy. My son thinks it's a natural resource, by the way, and it isn't. And it's run by a democracy. Therefore, the threshold to cut off the service to get your political objectives is extremely high. It's so high, we've never seen it. This is what we now need for 4G, 5G, all this connectivity. That technology always does what we ask it to do and explains to us that it doesn't do anything more.
Estonia, please go ahead and do.
All right. So, I mean, you did mention briefly about the seamless operation between private sector and public. How has that, and why was it important to have this seamless movement between the two?
Precisely because then you don't understand that government has to be less developed than private sector, for example, in technology. And if people ask me what is the biggest reason why Estonia is this digitally transformed nation, my answer is we have no segregation in labor market between private and public sector. In Estonia, I mean, you are not, your pension is not better if you stay in the same sector or same company all your life. We do not penalize people for being adventurous, moving between public and private sector. Actually, you cannot be a good leader in public sector if you have not some experience in private sector. It's held against you. So we have no segregation in our labor force. And it's very unexpected answer, I know, but this is the reason. I mean, we go hand in hand because most of us have experience in various sectors. I have worked in telecoms, energy sector, investment banking, and then advised Prime Minister, then been an European Court of Auditor member, and now President. So we all have this kind of various jobs. And that means that we know each other. And also nowadays, if you think about, for example, European Union agreed a certain rule set for digital services, most governments regulated this alien thing, private sector. Estonia regulated itself. The government also had to make sure that the GDPR, the European Union rule set, applies to our own services, which means you are not regulating unknowing what you are doing to those service providers, because we are with them, we are one of them, and the private sector is with us in all of it.
Estonia has opened up its higher education sector, the university sector, tremendously. What I'm thinking, and this is what I need to ask, is how exactly does Estonia handle their immigration issues with relation to higher education input from other parts of the world, them joining the workforce in Estonia and being part of that community?
There are 2 models of involving people in your economy and in your education system. One is everybody comes to your country. The other is our companies go and hire people elsewhere. Yes. And our universities also offer quite a lot of MOOCs and I mean online courses, of course. But indeed, I mean, we are of course also striving to have more talent in our country, and therefore we have created such a system like Startup Visa. And if you are working in a sector where something is growing quickly, it can be turnover, it can be profit, or even the number of people working for you, you have an easy access to global workforce, and you can ask people to work in our country. And that people know Estonia very well, and also the startup visa system is a result of another project. Estonia offers e-residency. Which means that the access to this digital ecosystem is given to trusted people. We check their background, by the way. Trusted people from third countries. They don't have to be European Union countries neither. I mean. And we have many e-residents who establish companies in Estonia without ever setting their foot in the country. You can work in Estonian company if you are an e-resident, and if you are not, it's difficult because you have to log in, with all these things all the time. And this way, e-residency also creates an opportunity to participate in our workforce. And I mean, this way we have seen what the others are starting to see now, that the global services online market exists. And it is totally free and well developed. You know why? Because nobody bothered to regulate it, because nobody noticed. Now my worry is that when we start to take notice, and it's rightly so that we have to regulate to a certain extent.
Yep.
But I mean, I wanted to not to regulate towards being closed. For example, if you have European cloud of data, I still want that designers from Kenya or bookkeepers from Australia or from wherever world can have access to my data. I mean, controlled access, of course. But access to offer services into this European cloud. High risk is that we regulate it so that this market opportunity will be closed. That is a second big element which I'm very sensitive about. Now, if I have, let's say, 1,000 bookkeepers working in Estonia from Kenya, how internationally, I mean, I maybe pay them into their PayPal account. How can they declare to your tax board and assure your tax board that this is all I paid them?
Right.
I mean, we need to internationally think about it, because what I don't want is that to ignore the problem that if I simply pay into a PayPal account, these people in your country, I mean, they have the resources, but they have to go without social security system. So I would be actually, I mean, treating your country unfairly. Because I mean, we will get the economic benefits, but you will be left with these people in your hands, not knowing that actually they could participate in your social system. And this is globally a big issue, which I always raise when I'm at multilateral fora in the European Union, also in OECD, that we have to create a model where we do not kill this services market, but allow the social benefits to be really used by both countries where people work and where people live. A global digital nomad will find a solution. But if we do not facilitate their remaining part of also our social security system, the richer ones go private and the poorer ones simply go without.
And it's a global conversation, Madam President, because just like you're talking about this, it's about where is the company domiciled and are they paying taxes locally? If that's the same way we're saying, if we get some Kenyans becoming e-residents of Estonia and working for Estonia, you're paying them, yet they are using our services, they're using the local services. How does Kenya benefit from this? You say you raise this all the time at every forum that you have an opportunity to. What are you reading? Are the world leaders seeing what you're saying?
Company level, yes, because there is now an agreement that corporate income tax will be globally harmonized. And company-wise, yes, but we have to realize that in this digital world, I mean, people don't have anymore to assemble into companies to raise their productivity. I mean, they don't have to. And they can instead, I mean, if you are a good specialist, you can offer your services globally. You may work at the same time in Australia, in Kenya, in America. And we need also to create models for these independent service providers. I mean, of course, they can all create companies and some of them might choose to create them in Estonia, some here in Kenya. Then it is very easy. I mean, this international regulation will apply to them. But what to do about those who are independently working and who are not interested in creating companies, but also probably realize that they need to be part of the social security system, and how to make this kind of work very well seamlessly. In addition, what you have is that, I mean, they work intermittently. And most of our social systems demand industrial area work pattern. 9 to 5, a certain address where you work, and a certain address where you live, and then, in one you pay taxes, other you receive services. They don't live this way. So we have to offer them more flexible, kind of safe hub of a state, which, I mean, gets the taxes and provides services globally. Because in addition, these people never live in one place. I mean, they live also globally. And in Estonia, we are, for example, offering also an opportunity to keep your child in Estonian school with some online support and help to pass Estonian curriculum wherever you are globally. For example, I've seen also here in Kenya, our honorary consul says me that her kid is in school in Estonia only because we have this system. She heard it from me, that we have it in some speech. I mentioned it, looked it up. And of course, it takes a lot of effort from parents, because partially it would be homeschooling, even if the child could log in into a classroom and so on.
Yeah.
Some schools in Estonia offer this opportunity. But I mean, this is the way of thinking. I mean, we allow our citizens to roam globally. European Union labor market is free. We have to follow my citizen with services. They have to be able to vote online. This is elementary, but they have to also be able to school online their kids and so on. And we have to find a common model. And here now international community comes in agreeing how then taxes are distributed and how the services are offered.
We're having a conversation with Her Excellency Kirsty Kaliulide. She is the President of the Republic of Estonia. She is right here in the Situation Room on SpiceFM. We're also live on KTN Home, on KTN News. We're live streaming the show all over the world on our digital platforms. Your Excellency, allow me now to plug in Kenya nicely. We have a well-educated population. We are very well placed geographically. Kenya is actually, if not the leading, one of the leading IT and innovation hubs in Africa. Now, you've talked about very many opportunities, for example, e-residency and Kenyans being able to apply, and then, of course, you'll vet them. What other ways can this population in this country benefit or even contribute to this global conversation about digitization? For example, we are very good with online jobs.
We both can contribute to the global community. And we were, for example, yesterday discussing with President Kenyatta that we need to make sure that globally no child gets lost, that we know who is born where to whom. So we could offer them vaccination, education, monitor there is no child trafficking, etc. And this can only happen if globally we register the birth of every baby online. Estonians do it, but we are not a good example, because everybody says, but you are in Europe and you are rich and all this. But there are little hubs of digital development where digital IDs actually exist, and Kenya is one of those. So Kenya could be the role model for the rest of the continent. And also I think you have some other conditions which are met to operate a kind of mobile registration into a population registry of babies, because you use M-Pesa. And you don't need, much more complicated system to register birth of a baby, for example. And this way you get the digital citizen when you get the citizen, and they grow up digital. And then you can actually, offer them all other services. And because you have this digital ID, you are able to demonstrate to all your neighbors, how this can be properly done, that, people have easy access to services and government is not leaving anyone behind. And we found that this could be really something where we could together contribute to the global development, for example. And of course, there are numerous other ways. If you move forward with digital service provision, your colleagues, particularly in the East African community, definitely will follow. You plug in nicely into Smart Africa, of course.
Yeah.
And I've never seen in any multilateral forum a bigger willingness to use technology to leapfrog than African Union Summit. There is such a readiness to move ahead, but many countries do not know where to begin. And you serve as a local role model, I believe. And of course, it's also, what I can also say is that economically, of course, the first ones always win. So if you move faster, it will not only be a role model, but also a beneficial way to develop your economy. And I really, I trust this local kind of digital thinking to really allow you to move forward.
We thank you very much for joining us, Your Excellency. You're told that you need to leave, and we appreciate that you've come to us. You're going to the Strathmore University later today. Just tell us about the program that you have.
Well, meanwhile, I'm also going to meet several UN bodies, and then in the university we will discuss digital development and opportunities on leapfrogging. With that, later we'll have a business seminar, because we don't have not only, companies who do public digital services provision, but as I already talked about, Space Trip and Team Better, we have others with us who are seeking their niche in Kenyan ecosystem. And for example, we are launching with OPIC, which is an Estonian education startup, a program here where they are digitizing all Kenyan school curriculum to have it, digitally available. Textbooks and also exercise books and all this. So you can, from online, teachers can send exercises. Imagine what the opportunity for really egalitarian school system creation this gives you. So this is also part of the program, for example. So there are many opportunities. Follow us, what we're doing, and you see that we can really do many things, but always together, because, Estonian companies are tiny. They are very beneficial partners because they need local partners. Our workforce is extremely tiny, 650,000 people. Bolt alone, actually, which is also Estonian unicorn, they have 300,000 people in their workforce. I mean, Estonian companies always hire locally. And this, I believe, is also a benefit for close cooperation.
Indeed it is. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us in the Situation Room today. And as you go back to Estonia, as you say goodbye to office, because this is your final trip as president.
Yes.
What do you want to do after this?
I already have promised to Secretary General of UN, Antonio Guterres, to remain for 2 years the global advocate for women and children. We want to work on nutrition, maternal mortality issues, but also how to use new technologies then to promote indeed the same child registration and how to then offer services online. Also, for example, in fighting maternal mortality, digital tools, web doctors, for example, are the main tool which you currently can use, for example, in Afghanistan. So I already have a few such roles. I'm also trying to bring together Estonian business to spend 2% on R&D. I brought together Estonian parties to make a promise that government spends at least 1% of GDP on R&D. Now the private sector needs to reciprocate, so I'm now trying to work with them. And then we have a wonderful school, which is a coding school in least developed part of Estonia, and really an industrial area which loses their oil shale industry because we go green nowadays. And this is a programming school, and I've promised to help them any way I can. So you see, I have many projects ongoing, but still there will be space certainly for more. So I'm looking into the future.
How does your interest in beekeeping fit into all this?
Ecology and saving this planet is the biggest global worry, where it is very, difficult to bring in, this kind of wider public, because wider public needs symbols. Bees are very nice symbols. They lose their space in countryside ecosystems, but we can bring them into the town, where, by the way, there are less poisons than you have sometimes on the fields and so on. So they are my ambassadors of clean nature to Estonian capital, and also to our discourse about green change and the need for it.
Environment.
Thank you very much. Asante sana for joining us. We wish you a lovely day.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.